All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tales of Agmar. I'm your host and creator, Sinjin, and today we're going to dive more into the GearSmiths. We touched on them briefly last week, as well as a little bit earlier in the cast, just for a second, but we're going to really dive in here, chat about them, and it's going to be super fantastic. So, before I start diving into these other dragon blessed people, we got some announcements. Announcement number one. Sorry, I almost clapped there, and I'm not sure how it's going to carry through. I bet to carry through kind of weird right now with my current mic and setup, so we're not going to worry about clapping. But anyways, the Discord and Ko-fi, we got those out, right? The Discord is our little sort of community thing that links us all together across all the various platforms that Tales of Agmar is present on, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube. We have Instagram and Facebook accounts. We have other social medias progressively coming out as I have time to run those up. And yeah, so that's where we all to go. We chat. It's a free community. You don't need to pay anything. You don't need to like buy anything or any of that. You just come, you join. Link is down in the description below of these episodes. The other one's the Ko-fi. That is our slowly blossoming sort of tip jar, as well as it's going to have other things in the future. We'll see. I mainly kept the Ko-fi as a tip jars because I'm not a huge fan of just everyone continuously signing up for more and more subscriptions as the days go on, because as we know, those subscription prices continue to rise, and as I get into more Tales of Agmar stuff, we will see how we handle subscriptions in the future. I've been toying that around a little bit, but since we're still getting off the ground, I'm not worrying about it too much. All right, and right, Tales of Agmar is a podcast, comes out every single Monday at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Don't forget to follow and comment as it helps us out so much. We've been able to reach tons of new people, and thank you guys so much for doing that. And if you haven't, please feel free to follow and drop a comment, say hi, say bye if you really want to at the end of this. Whatever you feel like is cool. If you got a question, you can ask a question, whether that's in the comments or in the Discord. I will do my best to respond to you. And finally, my favorite thing to update you guys all on, the editing process. At time of recording, it's going quite well. I'm actually done with the first big story edit. And so I spent the time kind of restructuring the story, making sure the story makes sense, right? All of the events are flowing very well. Ended up not being that hard. It's super fantastic. I'm just in a very big grammar edit right now. That's a little bit more slow going, just because I have my fiance also checking that grammar for me so that, she can let me know where all those commas go, because there's a lot of commas. For anyone that's not an English major out there, the English language uses a lot of commas. So stay tuned for the comma updates. And yeah, so we're still on track though for that May drop date of the, sort of doing a weekly drop of the Royal Road, or weekly drop of the chapters through Royal Road. And let me know what you guys are thinking. Like, do you just want one drop a week of chapters, or would you like two? I'm thinking one is going to be good for now. I might just drop on the same day as the cast and just update you guys in these announcements what those week's chapters are that would have come out. Or I could do something twice, like every Tuesday and Thursday, something weird like that, or like Tuesday and Fridays, right? We can kind of mix it up, see what works. But let me know before that gets going. If I don't get too much input, I will just come up with something after doing some market research. And yeah, we'll have a grand old time with that release. But now that all the announcements are out of the way, let's dive into the supporting role of a gearsmith. So, within the organization of the Dragon Pantheon, which, if you have not listened to that episode, I would encourage you to go and listen to it. I talk about a few of the other dragons aside from Nori Kaija, and Dori Kaija, not to be confused with Nori Kaija, which is not a dragon at this moment. But, anyways, right, Dori Kaija, he is the head honcho of the GearBlades in the dragon realm, and is their dragon patron, right? And the GearSmiths also fall under his guidance. However, he's not the one that is directly over them or gives them tasks. So he's mainly over the GearBlades themselves. But instead of him lording over these GearSmiths, it's a council of other dragons that follow his teachings. Right, so he's got a couple different counselors. These are actually the Master Smiths from the dragon side of the void that end up making the gear swords, gear blades, gear knives, right? The gear weapons that everyone starts out with as a new gear blade. And so they are actually in charge of these GearSmiths. And because of that, they're going to work differently. They're going to run more of that support role. They are focused more so on making sure that you have weapons available, right? They're going to make sure that your weapons are in good condition. We chatted that a little bit last week. And they, excuse me, right? While they're doing that, so their big thing is not to directly go and oppose the demons. They're running that support role. So Smiths, GearSmiths, hence why they're called GearSmiths. They can sometimes be referred to as forgers, and they primarily achieve this through use of their crystalline forges that they carry around with them. And that forge, it's like it's an interesting combo. What I have in my head right now, I wish I could do a better drawing of it for you guys. Maybe we'll get an artistic representation in the future. But it looks like how you normally think crystals would look, but it's like a very big crystal. You got to think a little bit like a good sized, probably about like thigh in diameter, circumference kind of thing. So very big, very chunky. They are heavy. Thankfully, these guys are smiths. They've hopefully built up some muscle at this point, so they can carry it around with them. It's not too bad. And then there's usually a built-in handle, whether that's like on the side or on the top, and they just carry that with them. Some of them throw it in a backpack. These guys they don't have access to the void. The GearSmiths don't, so they can't go stow it. They've got to carry everything with them, or as we'll talk about later, in their forge. But we'll get to that in a second. So first off, let's talk about the forge. What does it do? It's pretty simple. It allows the user to fix broken weapons and modify them, as well as apply things such as emblems, glyphs, or marks, or blessings, etc. Just a bunch of different things from not just Dori Kaija, but the other big dragons on the Dragon Pantheon. And that it's not just the objects from the dragons that they can put these things on. These glyphs, marks, blessings, emblems, etc. can also be dropped on materials that are made in the real world, right? That's how we get the Buster swords that I've talked about a few times. Those swords are made from GearSmiths. But thankfully, the forge does a lot more than that. In addition to what it does forge-wise, in case its user finds themselves in a combat scenario, it can be used to protect allies from projectile weapons. And what that looks like is basically, kind of fancy, you could think sort of video game moves here. Crystal Forge gets dropped down on the ground, maybe a twist of the handle, maybe an incantation. Still workshopping that a little bit to see. I'm leaning towards a combination of the two, twist of the handle with a short incantation kind of thing. Need a second to spin up the forge, get it going, but then it sprouts into a dome shield, protecting from projectiles. Enemies could still enter in, however, doesn't have a very good like friend versus foe identifier or anything like that, as it's kind of magical in its execution of things, at least for the people of Agmar. But anyways, all right, someone interested in the melee range, they're gonna easily be able to get through. However, think to the fact that we've got arrows, bolts, and bullets, as well as artillery, all existent on the battlefields of Agmar and beyond. It's got quite a few uses in universe, not just for the sci-fi, not just for the fantasy people, but also for the sci-fi people, should that be employed by them in the future. All right, so now we know a little bit more about what the GearSmith does, as well as kind of their gift from the dragons, what it lets them do. Let's get a little bit more into the forge itself, aside from, that shield thing. We've got a couple interesting details here. to start, when the forge is being used, it's not like the sword is inserted into the crystal itself. The user actually goes inside the crystal with the materials that they're going to be using, whether that's raw or finished materials, and that goes into a special forge that's been created by the dragons. It's believed to be similar to the forges that the dragons would use to make the gear swords, but it doesn't have all the tools needed to craft new swords, just repair them. Now, if you wanted to come in and make a like just normal sword, you totally could. It's just for whatever reason the forges, excuse me, not for whatever reason. There is a reason. What the reason is they don't have a bunch of that material to make new swords ready. So unless they were to melt a whole bunch of swords down, which we will talk about in a little bit, they don't do, then they would be able to do that. So really, we're just crafting different swords. Maybe if somebody is swapping from just a normal gear sword into a knife, everyone starts with a sword, and so if you want a knife, you've got to go talk to one of these guys to turn it into a knife, or knives, depending on what you're doing. For instance, maybe you get a sword, but after some training, you decide, hey, I really just want to swap it all into throwing knives. You would bring your sword to a GearSmith, and they could change it all into throwing knives. Very cool concept that we're running around with that I'm running around with right now. But someone being able to use throwing knives and manipulate the void is kind of a way to return those to them. Anyways, we'll see how that comes out in the future. It's just been a character idea for a while, and we'll see where that comes in to the rest of the continuation of Tales of Agmar, because I haven't really plopped them down anywhere inside the rest of the story. But anyways, sorry. Coming back to that, or back to the forge, and going inside of it. Probably wondering how that works, right? Again, it's pocket dimensions. Each crystal inside of it is a gateway into a pocket dimension, so you could kind of argue, oh, it sounds like they have access to the void. Yes and no, right? It's similar to how the GearBlades can drop into the void and then also have their own pocket dimension. However, GearSmiths, their pocket dimension is anchored to their forge. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And here, so a little more about the interesting part of the forge is that while someone is inside the forge, right, while you're looking around for items in your forge or while you're forging something, your forge, that crystal forge, can't move. Otherwise, you and anyone that's stuck in there with you, assuming that somehow people are stuck in there with you, are stuck there. And you actually can't get out until the forge is returned to the exact point where it was placed earlier. And so that leads into some interesting things, right? Lore-wise, right? Someone can be stuck inside one of these things and their forge is just waiting. And you go into the forge, you find out, oh, you're stuck here. But you've got to go hunt down, right, where that person would have been. And so those are things that players could have used when this was really going to be a D&D campaign. They could use that as like little side quests. Maybe their whole thing is they've been taught by the previous user of the forge. And because of that, they're also at the same time trying to free their master, right? And a big thing with this is usually with forges, they are passed down from teacher to student. They actually aren't just made again and again. There's only so many of them that exist within inside of the Agmar unison. So they're a very unique thing. Definitely something that you want to keep with you, that you don't want to lose. And if you were to lose it, very dangerous. People go looking for these all the time, especially GearBlades themselves, the GearBlade users. They would go out and do that. And so, right, D&D wise, kind of talk about that. Good way to cap everything off. And another bit here, along with the forges, right, how they get passed along, GearBlades themselves, caveat to the forges getting passed along, they don't get passed along. And so the actual GearBlades themselves, those weapons, they are sent back to the dragons, usually via a forge, a crystal forge. And through that process, the dragons take them back, smelt them down, create a weapon for the future. And the whole idea of this is to keep basically an account of all of the blades. Now, there's obviously interesting things, right? If you're a noble and you have like your great-great-grandfather's gear sword, the overall like Gearblade monastery isn't going to be very excited about that, and so it's usually something that you hide from the monastery. Creates some tension between those groups because the more spiritualistic Gearblades are very much like, oh, we need to return it back from whence it came, and other people may be like, oh, we have a very sentimental attachment to this, but those usually get worked out in the Gearblade's favor, and the sword is sent back if it is found out. So, carrying on from there, we need to talk about what the GearSmiths use in weapon wise. Yeah. And that is a hammer. And now you're probably thinking, Sinjin, every single other blacksmith class has a hammer. Why give your own version of the class a hammer, especially when you're trying to make things unique? And the answer is because I just simply in my head saw a guy with a crystal dome shield and a hammer, and so that's what it is now. It's a really cool aesthetic in my head. I think it's going to be really exciting to run over, to explore. It adds a lot of tactical depth with inside just different combat scenarios within the book, as well as adds that big support role, which is something when I was digging through all of my original notes for Tales of Agmar, and this was made with the original chunk of like D&D stuff, but after digging through the Gearblade class itself, I realized I didn't have a good support class for them, and so just making a very cool blacksmith that is also battle ready was an interesting idea, and I ran with it, and this is what we got. And so it's very, very good. And I think I mentioned this last week, but this kind of with the everything else isn't explored too much in book 1 of Tales of Agmar Gambit. It's gonna be explored a little bit more in book 2 as well as book 3, and that's for a number of reasons I mentioned last week. But book 1 really does just do a good job of setting up the entire world while still being plenty action packed, right? So it's not like I spent a few hundred pages just setting up the environment of the world. I'm setting up the world for you while putting you into the current events. And so if you're a fan of world building, action within world building, just exciting books that have good action in it, you're going to like Tales of Agmar Gambit book 1. And yeah, so that's it. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. That's everything that I want to and kind of can reveal to you without spoiling too much of the story. Next week, we're going to start a new little mini series, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting, especially if you're someone who enjoys world building, since that's a big thing with the podcast, or seeing other people's thought processes when it comes to things, especially again, if that's world building. And so if you haven't figured it out already, that's what we're doing. We're kind of going to go through my creative process as a writer slash world builder slash storyteller and chat a little bit about what that is going to be. It's going to be, right now it's planned to be 7 chunks, 7 episodes long. I'm going to keep them all to about the 20 to 30 minute format for everybody, just to keep it in a good consumable. They might run, I'm thinking, a little bit more on the longer side, but again, I will try to compress it so that it is in a good format. But of course, if you guys have questions during this time, feel free to ask tons of questions. I really want it to be an exciting process to where you as a listener or as someone that's trying to tell your own stories are able to have something to help you get some traction to tell your own story. It's not meant as something that's supposed to replace any thought processes that you have going on concerning your story. I'm not a huge fan when people are like, oh yeah, here's a plug and play for making your own story. I tried a lot of those and I was like, it's not my story. It's now someone else's story. And those things can still be good, right? Especially when you're starting out. But I'm a big proponent. I'm assuming I'm using that word right. I'm a big supporter. I'll use that word because I know what that is. A big supporter of making your own stories and really making said story uniquely yours. Fan fictions are fantastic. They can be really exciting, really good material. There are some good ones out there. I have nothing against fan fiction. I just really support telling your own story. I hate it when someone grabs a story that's someone else's and the characters and everything, something that commonly will happen with movies. and then they try to tell their own story through it, and it doesn't match anything involving the author's original view and aspects of the story. So if you know what I'm talking about, right, this world building workshop thing series, what we're gonna do, gonna be very exciting. If you guys need any notes or anything, I'll try to do my best to, or like notes or like worksheets. I don't know. I'm not planning on doing any worksheets right now, but if you guys are like, oh, worksheet could be cool, I'll see what I can whip up and make worksheet wise in like Word or something like that. And that would probably then just be released for free on the Ko-fi as just a safe way to download the files. But, anyways, not to bore you all with all my notes and ramblings about world building and everything, just thank you guys so much for coming, and don't forget to keep listening to support the cast. This has been Sinjin with Tales of Agmar, and wherever you are, be a good one.